Eiffel 65, an Italian band. How many people know that?
Didn't know that.
Yeah.
So they're speaking Italian during the song. That's why people can't understand.
Yeah,
it.
that's what it's.
I'm blue.
That's Italian. Yes. I'm blue. Welcome to your corner, Späti, with me, Ciarán, and also Rob's here.
Hey guys.
Nick and Yulia fucked off somewhere, and now it's just us boys. And since there's no Yulia here, it's going to be fucking doghouse. Woof woof, woof woof woof.
Ruff ruff.
We've effectively silenced all the women. Hooray!
We want to thank everyone for the feedback so far. It's been really great to hear people like the show. We're taking all of your feedback into consideration. We will be cutting Nick's mic all the time. We've already cut about 50 minutes of content that he gave, but yeah, we understand we have to cut it further.
Nick's actually here today.
But yeah, really, I hope just share it with people. You can leave us a review on iTunes. I don't know if we have any reviews yet, but that would be cool if you like the show. And yeah, we'll just keep giving you this good content. I would say here in Germany, the podcasting isn't quite as popular, and so people keep asking us for tips, like how we started a podcast, you know, and I want to give my tips for starting podcasts to everybody. There's three big ones, just based on personal experience. First, like immediately after you start the podcast, just make sure none of you are in the same place for like a month and a half. That should be enough time. It really keeps you on your toes. Like if you not allowed to build any momentum. Mm-hmm. You just spread. You're in completely different 9-hour apart time zones. It really distance makes the heart grow fonder and all that.
I'm Skyping in from Omsk, the ballet capital of Russia.
My second tip for podcasting is to just always record twice, maybe 3 times. Doesn't matter. Just your first try, it's not going to be good. You should just, spend the whole day recording yourself, repeating the same things over and over again, slowly driving yourself crazy. This is our 6th recording already.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Pretty good so far.
This is going to be the one. I'm feeling good about it.
I don't know. I'm going to delete this file.
And the last, most important tip is that, the first episode's got to start out strong. First 2 episodes, lots of research, lots of content, build up some trust with your listeners. Next episode, no research at all. You just got to be fresh, and those are the keys.
that may be a slight underhanded comment about this episode. You'll have to just keep listening to find out.
Follow these,
so many articles, so many references in the last one. I think we brought up Caliban the Witch in the last one, and now
we guarantee there will be no books mentioned this episode. Follow my 3 simple rules. Buy my book.
I do not read.
Buy my book, the Podcasting Guru. I interview Scott Adams.
Louder with Stephen Crowder,
the rational psychologist, and all these people about how to make good. What
was that fucking podcast again? Like the Angry Dads or like Dad Warriors?
Ciarán, you are giving away very special content that we cannot reveal it to the world yet.
Yeah, we're now just a men's right activist reaction podcast. This is great.
Don't worry, we will go into the Angry Dads podcast.
Yeah. I firmly believe we should have less rights. I have gotten away with too much.
So we're just gonna be talking about the news. What's new this week, Ciarán?
About 20 minutes ago, someone opened fire in a Czech hospital. But
that's not good. I didn't know that.
Yeah, there's not much about it at the moment. Let's talk about some other bullshit like Joe Rogan.
I did want to say, I think I saw this last week. Very, very excited for my home away from home, my hometown within Germany, Hamburg. They are getting, I don't know if people know, but Hamburg is a little bit like the Broadway of Germany. It's a high class city. It's very cultured. They have,
invented the hamburger.
Exactly. They have, a lot of musicals in Hamburg. They have The Lion King, Aladdin. I can't even remember the other ones they have. But like when you're in the city and like at the
Distinctly
port,
not
you
Fiddler
see,
on the Roof.
You see across, yeah. No
Oh, Germany.
when you're in the port area of Hamburg and you look across the river, there's just like a special theater just for the Lion King. Like there's a giant Lion King banner and like there's a ferry that will take you over there. And so like Hamburg's like a substantial part of Hamburg's tourism economy is to get Germans to come to Hamburg, you know, spend a night on the town, and then they go take their little ferry and see Aladdin and then come back. Like this is I need to explain all this background because Hamburg is stepping up their game. They're entering the 21st century and Hamilton is coming to Hamburg.
Or like Hamiltonberg, am I right?
Just like this podcast, I often think we're just shooting the shit. Probably doesn't matter. Hopefully we say some interesting things. But after learning that Hamilton is coming to Hamburg, nothing convinces me more that this podcast is essential.
Yeah.
That Germany and Europe is slowly being infected by the American madness. And I'm like a visitor from the future who came back and is warning of what's to come.
I'm delightfully ignorant of all German culture. This is brilliant.
Ciarán cannot wait. He's going on the opening night to Hamilton. He's like, damn, they're like rapping, but they're the founding fathers.
Oh,
This
God.
is so cool.
This is so cool, guys. What if all these slave owners danced?
Ciarán is making the German version of the soy face, the halloumi face.
I actually really love halloumi. This is a personal attack.
Shout out halloumi.
Best king of cheeses.
I can imagine some German right wingers coming up with halloumi boys. I don't know about falafel. I think they'd go with halloumi.
Falafel's too popular.
Like I said, coming soon.
Gamuse kebab.
Anyway, I feel like I might need to go to Hamburg. I think that Cornish Späti is going to have to pay for me to get a ticket so I can do a little field research.
From all that money coming in.
Because I just can't, I just can't wait to see all of the like old German couples who came to Hamburg for a little taste of culture and they just go see Hamilton and they're just, I don't know, really, really pissed off about the rap or something like that.
I'm curious, like, so these are the American, like, current cast coming over, right? They're not getting, like, German people to...
I have no idea who the cast is going to be. It's some company. I should look up the name of the company because actually this is an important point. So I don't know if people know, but in Hamburg there's this famous squat called the Rote Flora. There's another newer squat called Gängeviertel, but that's the old one. It's been around since the 80s.
Bunch of cool people taking over a building.
And it's like it's the perfect like tying together of this story because the Rote Flora, this big building in the Schanze neighborhood, it was originally a theater and then it was a department store for a while. And then sometime in the 80s, they were going to turn it back into a theater for this new musical push, like to make Hamburg the like cheesy Broadway of Germany, to bring culture to this like dark land. And there were a bunch of protests and people were squatting the building. And then finally the squatters won. I mean, I'm oversimplifying it because there have been a bunch of fights since then. But the squat, it started being squatted in the 80s and it's basically been continuous since then. And they had to build some new theater around the corner down the street. But I'm just imagining this alternate timeline where Rote Flora isn't a symbol of like this, of a squat. And it's just having Hamilton in the middle of this like completely gentrifying neighborhood that like the rents are like going up rapidly, like all of the like the Turkish community that lives there, like all of the like racist elementary schools, like don't give any of them passes to go to gymnasium. This is actually what happens in the Schanze. And like, then, you know, you can just go see Hamilton at your lovely Flora Theater.
Those are the bones of it.
It's great, folks. We love it. We love it.
Yeah, I feel like if Rote Flora doesn't get on that in terms of like a campaign of just like, why the fuck are you going to see a musical about a bunch of slave owners?
I've been workshopping. I haven't figured it out yet, but I have been workshopping what the German version of Hamilton would be. I think I've got it because they can't
Weimar.
They can't do the Nazis. It could be Weimar.
Yeah.
Actually, you're right. It probably is Weimar. I was thinking it would be the dude who tried to kill Hitler, who was also a Nazi, the general.
Oh yeah. Okay.
But they would make him Jewish or like, I don't know. And then
that's just the musical version of Incredible Bastards or Glorious Bastards.
Yeah. But actually, now that I say it out loud, that might be too cool for Hamilton. And Glorious Bastards is better than Hamilton.
Okay. Moving on to our next topic is that just to date this podcast a little bit, but everyone was like really hyped over the fact that Alex Jones was on Joe Rogan. I really enjoyed it.
Fresh content. I'm so excited when Joe Rogan drops that new content. That new fire. Spits that truth. Joe Rogan, I just can't stop listening to him.
He is the real rapper. It really
We're going to get to that.
Yeah. It really does feel like the whole watching it really felt like a constantly shifting before and after picture of someone who'd gone through like a chemo platform or something. Because it was, I don't know why.
Wait, I don't, who's the before after?
No, but like, you know, one of those like, if you eat this like calky powder and go to the gym twice a week, you could look like, we could turn Alex Jones into Joe Rogan. Also at the same time, Joe Rogan is going to look like Alex Jones once he like finally bombs and doesn't have a career anymore. Because God fucking like Joe Rogan is like the worst comedian. I fucking hate him. The whole reason he started his podcast
Does he claim to be a comedian?
He started as a comedian.
That's true. He does have stand-ups that suck. Yeah. I thought he was just the like MMA guy.
No, like he started as a stand-up, and the reason he started the podcast was because he was such an insufferable jackass. No one in Hollywood or like the LA stand-up scene wanted to work with him. Yeah. So he was like, "I'm going off and make my own."
If you're too big of a jackass to not be accepted in a stand-up scene, that's pretty bad.
Right. I say this with all my love and my heart for stand-up, the world's premier dying art form. Yeah, also like the LA stand-up scene. I've heard things about LA. That's probably a very insufferable stand-up scene. But yeah, at the same fucking time, I liked how everyone was obsessing over this because it's Alex Jones. Alex Jones is hilarious, but like the most insidious stuff the Joe Rogan experience does is when they don't have people like Alex Jones on. Because Alex Jones is like comedic in his just like ridiculous conspiratorial fire and brimstone. You were saying before we were recording that he's very, very comparable to like these end of days preachers.
Yeah, I mean, there's a long tradition of this in the US, especially like whether it's, I think Jonathan Edwards is his name, or the like burned over district in New York, like with the rise of Mormonism and all these Seventh-day Adventists and religions like that. Like there's a long history of just saying like the end times are very, very near. And they had a certain theatricality that, I mean, they were quite popular. And Alex Jones has that same theatricality. It's a fundamentally more, that language of religion just doesn't, I mean, Alex Jones does talk about God and like talks about, I don't know.
He talks about demons.
Yeah, exactly. He talks about demons a lot. But it's in a very, I mean, it's just updated to the modern US culture. I mean, it's much more secular. It's much more conspiratorial. There's something, I mean, maybe we can get into how just the rise of conspiracy and like how conspiracies is like a new language in the US, especially since World War II, I don't know, in like a growing US state and a growing like US intervention abroad, that like all of these like backroom deals, like the only way to like comprehend, the significance of that or the power of that and rationalize that against like your helplessness or your perceived helplessness and like actually changing anything about history or the government are these wild conspiracy theories about how the world is run.
So it's kind of interesting you say post World War II because it kind of sounds like when the New World, I hate to say New World Order when talking about like conspiratorial thinking, but when like the current state of affairs came in after World War II and America was supposedly on top of the world, then yeah, I think a lot of people who don't feel like they're on top of the world within America have to turn to conspiratorial thinking to explain it.
Yeah.
The same time though, I think it's very true, like a lot of people he reminds me of, and possibly when he got started, a lot of these people talked about like religiosity and conspiracy thinking and demons and stuff, but in the realm of culture rather than politics. I feel like a lot of people who talk like him were talking about like what was on the latest movies and kids' nipple rings are too exposed or some shit. Where he's gone like full, they're putting shit in the water, which that used to be like, and chemtrails, that used to have like a fine tradition of left-wing conspiratorial thinking.
Well, I gotta say, I think it's Germany and Norway were like the only two countries that don't have fluoride in the water, or the only two like Western countries.
Really?
I am pretty sure Germany does not have fluoride in the water.
Fucking hell.
Shout out the strong German defenders.
I have to go to the dentist now or some shit.
You will not turn the frogs gay in Germany. Alex Jones, we hear you. Alex Jones, come to Germany.
Do you think he's Alex Jones here? I don't know. Alex Jonas.
Alex Jones.
Yeah, but like, yeah, like this is all funny and stuff because like Alex Jones is just a hilarious character.
Yeah, and he knows he's playing a character. I mean, I don't know it off the top of my head, but you can find his paper trail online. He wasn't always like this. He adopted the persona more and more when he realized it was getting
Traction.
views, getting traction, yeah.
But like also there's the thing about like his very public divorce. The thing she said sounds like he kind of became the character a little bit as well.
Sure. Yeah.
More recently. But the thing about it was funny because like he's rattling away a mile a minute and Joe Rogan's not actually able to keep up with him. Because like Joe Rogan's entire podcast is like play the clip of the donkey that we put on DMT, and like if you put a donkey.
Jamie, can you play that clip of the frogs turning gay?
It's every like we gave DMT to a donkey and now discovered libertarianism or some shit. But like, yeah, he's not able to keep up with it. He's not pushing back because that's not what Joe Rogan does. Joe Rogan never pushes back. The only like I think I've heard the best description of the appeal of Joe Rogan's podcast, which is. The idea of Joe Rogan's podcast is you put an expert in a room with someone who clearly isn't. And they do that sometimes where they have like some sort of astrobiologist or in the room, someone like from NASA talking to him about like, and then he'll mention something stupid about like, but octopuses could be from space. And like that's, I can understand the appeal of that if it wasn't like 3 fucking hours long.
Well, I think that is like, I don't know. Maybe I'm being too optimistic because I'm just thinking of my friends who listen to Joe Rogan. I think that what they like about it is the idea like, yeah, they talk about some crazy science shit, man. Like they just smoke weed and think about like, man, it's fucking crazy. And that in itself is pretty harmless. And in fact, it's kind of interesting. I mean, you should... whatever like makes people have some more perspective of the world and like in the universe, you know, that's cool.
Well, there's like little things I've heard.
If only it were just that.
If it were just that, yeah. If it were just that, then maybe Ciarán would be talking about the like whole AM FM distinction of like actual machines versus fucking magic. Where like you have Elon Musk talking about the Hyperloop and it's like, where's the Hyperloop? It's like Hyperloop makes no fucking sense. Build trains. Trains exist.
The Hyperloop is the greatest expectation versus reality thing because like the reality is the Hyperloop is just like a shitty subway in Chicago, like because it's something about it's being piloted in Chicago, and it's just like a special subway to go from O'Hare Airport to downtown, and you're like stuck in a cab underground, and you go like just as fast as you would in like from the subway, the actual blue line. Which isn't that great.
It just makes no fucking sense.
I should clarify it. Subway's very good. Train service, very good. It's just, more. We need more of it, and it definitely needs to be repaired. So that's the reality. And then you have these like Chicago, speaking of like neoliberal bootlickers, like the people, the Chicago machine now, the version of that, like especially under Rahm Emanuel, is just like, yeah, we love this. We love the Hyperloop, don't we? We're just sitting in it. And, you know, that blue line. This is the future, man.
So that's all Joe Rogan was. That would be the problem. Is like a very civic engineering problem. But like, unfortunately, a lot of the guests that Joe Rogan has had on in the past are people like fucking Gavin McInnes, the guy who started a militia in the United States and tried to recreate the assassination of the communist leader of Japan by bootstepping down a New York street holding a katana. Normal dudes like that. And then more recently, one of the most recent episodes that I had the unfortunate duty, I don't know, I watched it, I hate watched it today, is
Ciarán has seen all 1,250 episodes, all 3 hours each of the Joe Rogan Experience. I watched them.
My brain has turned... You watched me watch it, which is possibly the only thing slightly better than actually watching it.
Ciarán was Twitch streaming himself watching the Joe Rogan Experience, and I watched the Twitch stream. I was donating.
That might actually be somewhat profitable. But the most recent episode, or one of the most recent episodes, he has the CEO of Twitter on, Jack, whatever his name is.
He's just Jack.
Jack Twitter.
He shed the last name for like not being, I don't know, like efficient enough.
Not enough character. Like.
Jack Dorsey, I just remembered.
There you go. He had on this woman from the Twitter company who's like their policy expert and policy spokeswoman.
Sorry, you just said the Twitter company like you were 80 years old, like the Google.
From the Googles.
The Twitter company.
The bird company. But Joe Rogan, to bring on his journalistic expert, brought on Tim Pool, who is most famous on the left for being photographed with a bunch of neo-Nazis and trying to hide in his own beanie at the same time. Because he's like, I shouldn't be photographed with these people. Tim Pool is like the ultimate fucking concern trolling leftist. He tried to he equated on this podcast, equated intersectional feminism with like hate speech against trans people. Being like, you're banning all these conservatives for not using the right pronouns and doing this coded language. That was his whole shtick. And there's there's this there's this whole fucking feminism thing happening on the internet, and he used intersectional feminism, and the woman from Twitter is like, I'm not sure what these terms mean, can you explain it? And he just fucking falls apart. It's beautiful. He thinks that intersectional feminism, he actually describes what intersectional the problem that intersectional feminists have with historical feminism. He was like, intersectional feminists don't care about poor people. They only talk about people in terms of race, not realizing the whole reason that intersectional feminism exists is because the history of feminism kind of ignored race and class a little bit. And it was painful. Why did I watch that? And then I scrolled down and I looked at the YouTube comments, because it's all on YouTube, the best place for discourse.
So I've been thinking about why Joe Rogan is popular, and I think there's some aspect of this, I guess people call him like an everyman personality kind of thing, kind of what you were saying, in that they put him in a room with an expert and he kind of reacts as the audience would react, like maybe say dumb things, but tries to be funny in that way.
He genuinely has somewhat of an inquisitive nature.
Yeah. And I think that the best comparison that I can think of for him is like Drake. Like, he's the Drake of podcasting.
All right, go on.
I mean, every implication this has.
Thesis statement.
Because, well, first of all, I would say they're probably roughly as popular as each other in their respective fields. Like, I don't know, Drake is... maybe he's not the most popular rapper anymore. He's going down. So maybe Joe Rogan's still on the way up. But insofar as Mark Maron is, I don't know what, Jay-Z or something.
Do you think after Drake shows, people approach him like, you're the Joe Rogan of rapping?
Honestly, Drake would probably be like, that's so true. I've always respected him.
Man, never touch me. I'm going away.
But what's so similar about them is that so two things. The first is that they have this just completely I don't know if it's a sign of insecurity or something, but they just absorb whatever the guest is. I mean, this is well known among rap fans. They'll know that Drake is just constantly changing his style, and he'll go to Houston and be like, Houston feels like home. Finally, I feel like I have a home. And then he'll rap in the Houston style. And then he'll go to Atlanta and be like, finally, people understand me in Atlanta, in the same way that Joe Rogan has on some all right guy. And then Joe Rogan all of a sudden feels passionately about the plight of white farmers in South Africa. It's the same dynamic of just this completely blinkered, what, the only thing that's real is what is it directly in front of my face. And I think that comes from a place of just searching for something to grab onto, but it's the same. I mean, the dynamic among Drake is that you get at least he puts on people like Migos and he gives them a national bump. Yeah. The thing about Joe Rogan is that then he just becomes a gateway to the alt-right. So that's not quite the same dynamic. But I think that is also whatever that insecurity or latching onto something. The flip side of that is that it kind of makes them into a sympathetic everyman, in the sense that Drake
is
like,
every man.
Well, like he sings, but he's not like, as a singer, especially with all the autotune, he sings in such a way that you don't feel bad about singing along. So
Yeah.
I'm getting deep into my music takes right now.
Go for it.
No Nick, like no parents.
I'm here
Our
wearing.
mom and dad, Nick and Yulia, are not here. So
I'm wearing boots and a black and red flannel shirt to indicate to the world I'm definitely from a rap background myself. Not punk or hardcore, but go on.
like, so Drake, I think he sings in a way that like makes people like they don't feel bad about singing along because it's not so. I mean, it's melodic, but in an accessible way. Like he's not like a show-stopping singer that's like you just admire.
Yeah.
It's like sings in a way that you can sing.
Yeah.
And Joe Rogan is kind of like that for podcasting. He podcasts in a way that you could podcast. Like you're just sitting in the room smoking weed, being like, "That's crazy, man!" Like it's accessible.
And who's this? One of the Koch brothers. Well, let's get him in here for some questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like I can sing like Drake. Has anyone got that hotline bling? Alright. But yeah, Joe Rogan, gateway to the alt-right. Woo! As opposed to us.
Yeah.
We'll bring you on to that blood and soil. Gotcha.
Yeah, so Ciarán and I were joking that whenever we don't know like what to talk about, we'll just like do it was Jay Leno, right? Or like what's in like you see what's on the newsletter? Or David Letterman. Like you see what's in the newsletter?
It's a hack stand-up thing.
You know what's in the news lately, but our version, the Berlin version, is just to walk around and read the trash cans, the Mülleimer, and just whatever like left-wing or alternative stickers people are on there just to see what's going on.
I get all my hottest takes from like bins and the bathrooms of good clubs.
Yeah, like you hear about this? You hear about we got to defend Afrin? You hear about Rojava?
Hey, you hear about Rasmus Gagen? Jungen Gagen Rasmus?
Hey, why did I think this was a segue?
I don't know, it's great. I also don't understand why to do my Jay Leno voice I have to like, no one can see this, but I have to wave my hand around as if I have a cigar in it. You hear about this?
So I don't know if people have heard over here. Actually, some people have about what's going on in the U.S. There's Ilhan Omar, AOC, Venezuela, Israel, and AIPAC. They're all kind of vague anti-Semitism. It's kind of we're here to break it down for you. All the different touch on different aspects of this. Because I do hear people talking about it yesterday. I was in the bathroom. I was in the bathroom. Basically, I was at a demo yesterday for Frauenkampftag, International Women's Day, and someone did mention using this label of anti-Semitism to divide people and like disguise Islamophobia.
Rob was there because Rob is an ally. I wasn't there because I am an enemy. It's me versus all women.
Yeah, I mean, just to break it down for people who, just to give like a quick history, that I think AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, maybe is definitely the most famous of this new crop of the new Democratic representatives in Congress, in the House of Representatives. She was somewhat of a DSA member, Democratic Socialists of America, pretty prominent growing group on the socialist left in the U.S. She was a member of them, and she had a big upset to win the Democratic primary in her district of New York City, the Bronx and Queens. And so after that, she was just basically plastered on CNN and everywhere. And she got, I can say, a lot more publicity than I ever thought she would get. I mean,
AOC? Yeah.
Because I remember seeing her at the beginning as just like, oh, okay, it seems like she's anti-capitalist. That's good. We'll see if she's actually like that. Time will tell. But she was saying the right things at the beginning.
How her campaign was run as well. Like she came from like a working background, like as a bartender. She got all her stuff via small donations. Yeah,
exactly. So I mean, that's just a huge problem. I mean, there's a million things wrong with elections in the U.S. Forget just the problems. I mean, the problems with elections are that campaign finances might be the biggest one. But I think it's kind of easy to ignore left-wing voices, like a left-wing campaign. Like I could see a world where people just ignore AOC and don't give her media attention. I guess to even think that is probably like, cause like she could be, I don't know, Dennis Kucinich. It's like Dennis Kucinich, like just ignore them. Like they don't matter. but she did strike a nerve. I don't know whether that's because she has a different approach or just a changing media landscape or a changing political landscape, but she's clearly a figure. The Republicans talk about her constantly, talk about socialism constantly.
Half of that is thirst.
Yeah.
A lot of that
That's
is
the
thirst.
difference. Dennis Kucinich just was not up to the task.
No. I hate to reduce AOC to that, but a lot of people talking about her are just like...
Sorry. I was just...
he's not bad looking, this Dennis Kucinich lad.
Shout out Dennis Kucinich.
I wouldn't.
When I was like 12,
I would.
When I was like 12 and saw all the Dennis Kucinich bumper stickers on my grandparents' cars, I thought he was like, oh yeah, he's really popular.
How did it make you feel to realize that your grandparents were so goddamn thirsty for this for this Dennis? Dennis the Menace in the bedroom. That made no sense.
But Dennis Kucinich's new thing, or I don't even know if it's that new, but he said he was abducted by aliens.
Okay.
We can't get it. Dennis Kucinich, go on Joe Rogan, talk about your alien experience.
Yeah, that seems very on Joe Rogan's brand, actually.
Anyway, okay, we're gonna have to cut this. We're going all over the place. Yeah.
Ilhan Omar.
The one criticism we got was that we, don't stick to the topic, and here we go, back on our bullshit. Okay, so AOC was one of the most important Congress people in this new crop, but there were others too. This group Justice Democrats did some of the work, and their whole thing. I mean, they have a vaguely.
They use the label progressive, don't they?
Yeah, they definitely use the label progressive, but they have some stances that are good, like not taking any corporate donations. They want to primary Democrats, that is, like challenge Democrats and try to take over their seats rather than challenging Republicans. And
Medicare for all is also one of their things, is it? Or am I?
Probably.
Yeah.
Probably.
They're definitely not the ultimate goal, but if we're being like a bit more, like utilitarian, it's like, Ciarán, we won't get socialism if like the entire Congress is Justice Democrats. I'd be like, yes, we won't. But that would be better than the current state of affairs.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I want to get into that, but the point of bringing them up is that there was a kind of a crop, and again, with the whole media firestorm about this, they're on magazine covers and everything. A lot of it's framed around like it's younger women in Congress, which is good.
There was one Rolling Stones cover where it was like the 4 Justice Democrat women with Nancy Pelosi.
Yeah.
They're like, oh. Nancy doesn't, like, one is not like the others here.
Yeah. But, so one other, two people in this crop, that are worth mentioning are, Rashida Tlaib. Mm-hmm. She's a Palestinian American. I think she represents Michigan, and also Ilhan Omar, she represents, a district in Minnesota. And both of them have come out in support of BDS, which is
boycott,
basically like
sanctions.
Yeah, just to explain, it's boycott, divestment, sanctions against Israel, and this has been called for by Palestinian groups as a protest. I mean, whatever you want to call it, non-violent, peaceful protest hasn't been effective, and there's been calls for an economic boycott.
It's been modeled after how apartheid South Africa was treated.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And so this is I wouldn't call it a big thing in the US, but it's maybe a bigger topic in the US than in Europe, because the US does ally so closely with Israel. So it's more...
It's interesting you say that, because I always felt like BDS was more prominent in Europe, but that also could be that I come from Ireland, which is a very anti-Israel country. Yeah. They're just like, we're not doing colonialism, and Ireland was like, this looks a lot like colonialism. Please stop.
Yeah. And so I think it's also worth contrasting the reaction they got, especially Ilhan Omar, with the reaction that AOC got. But I'm getting my head of myself. So basically, Ilhan Omar's comments, the first was she was just tweeting that, APAC is, well, it was vague, because she had some tweet like it's all about the Benjamins, when people were saying that, talking about campaign finance and who donates to Congress people, and then people are saying like, are you saying that? The way Ilhan Omar comes into this picture is that she has been criticized, I would say, very intensely over the past month for just true statements she's made about how AIPAC, they are a lobbying group on behalf of Israel and the Netanyahu government, just how they operate in the United States.
Yeah.
And I do think it's worth contrasting. I mean, just everyone calling her in her comments anti-Semitic, engaging in anti-Semitic tropes, and just over the top. I mean, even like Donald Trump tweeting, and just everybody from, of course, the right, but also Democrats who are the more like
established Democrats.
Established, you can call them centrists, who are against these more, this like somewhat lefter side of the Democratic Party.
The ones who are afraid of being primaried by the Justice Democrats and Democratic
But the thing
Socialists.
is, I think it's worth, I mean, Ilhan Omar didn't get so much name recognition at the beginning, I mean, compared to AOC.
No. Ilhan Omar was getting a lot of this criticism of being anti-Semitic because she was talking about like Israel's relationship with the United States, AIPAC as a lobbying group to that end, and a lot of it was coming from her right. We'll say that, not necessarily the Americans, what the Americans would consider the right, but like some Republicans were shouting out as well as the established Democrats. And this kind of like a lot of dogpiling on this on Twitter, a lot of people getting very angry over not really anything of substance. Also, a lot of this was ignorance, and that's kind of the way we were portraying it, but a lot of it is also just like bad faith arguments of people who don't really want to engage with her points, that AIPAC has a lot of control, or maybe Israel is not doing some super stellar things within its own borders and without, that we should possibly stop supporting as a nation. And yeah, that kind of resulted in just how long? Like a week and a bit of nonsense. I feel like it's actually been going a lot longer than a week, but maybe that's just the nature of it.
I think it's worth pointing out the two big controversies, or the two steps that happened. I mean, so Ilhan Omar made her first comments about AIPAC. It was just a tweet. And this just blew up. Everyone, whatever, the media class, the Democrats, the Republicans, everyone was demanding an apology, saying the Democrats should censure her, like force her to, I don't know. I'm sure some people were calling for her to resign or whatever over just true statements she made. She apologized in what I thought was a somewhat fine non-apology apology. So shout out Ilhan Omar.
Yeah.
But they sort of like forced her into that. And then now 3 weeks later, she made some comments that weren't even, that sort of just like vaguely, they were less, I mean, whatever you want to say about like tropes or anything, they were more oblique, like, to construe them as anti-Semitic at all, you have to be acting in very bad faith.
Yes.
In the second one. I mean, her comments are something like, Israeli lobbyists like are claiming are asking Congress people to have like a allegiance to a foreign power. And people are like, oh, these are like, dual loyalty tropes about Jewish people. And that's just not what she said.
No,
she just literally used the word allegiance, and then that's what provoked the response from the Democrats this past week, where they wrote up a whole long resolution that was going to denounce her comments. And it was just like people's brains were exploding. And it so clearly reflected the fact that the first comments she made kind of opened the door to this.
Yeah.
And everyone was ready to, everyone was saying they were just waiting for their next comment, but they wouldn't even wait for another comment. They would just took something that was completely unrelated. I mean, completely.
Yeah.
And just like use that as an excuse to censure her or something. The good news is that they didn't censure her. There was a backlash. And from talking to people who aren't so involved, I think there was a general mindset amongst like liberals or Democrats, like, why are they so focused on this? Like, it's not that big of a deal.
Yeah.
Which is good.
There was some responses like, I felt like a lot of people in America, this might just be the bubble I'm in, but a lot of people in America kind of saw through this as somewhat bad faith. And at the same time, one thing that certainly helped this point is while this is happening, they're ignoring this like background of really really horrible Islamophobia against her as a person. There was, I think it was a poster in Virginia's.
West Virginia.
West Virginia. Oh, that's the good Virginia. It's the better Virginia.
Yeah, they are. They are. I have to say, if we're picking Virginias,
We're picking Virginias. Yes,
they have a good labor history.
Yeah. Well, they're literally the whole divide.
Problems now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a pretty poor state, but
The divide between them and the other OG Virginia is purely civil war, right? West Virginia was the
West
one.
Virginia did separate.
Yeah.
And shout out the West Virginia teachers unions.
Yes. But there was that, I think it was the House, like the state equivalent of House of Representatives, what's that called? State Congress. That's where the poster was of like conflating her, a woman who was born to a Somalian refugee, that she was like,
She was
emblematic of like 9/11.
Yeah.
That whole poster.
And just to be clear, because I think people say it both ways, Ilhan Omar was a refugee herself. I mean, I think she was born in Somalia, lived there until she was 10, and moved to the U.S. And we're jumping around now, but she made comments just a day or two ago about Obama, about how, you know, he had this like pretty smile, but then he's still drone striking the world and locking kids up in cages at the border. But it wasn't criticized in the same way because he was one of the quote good guys.
Yes.
And this is just plainly true. I mean, it'll piss a lot of Democrats off, but like finally, like you have a congressperson who's actually saying these things. Mm-hmm. And it's in no small part due to the fact that she came from, or that she grew up in a country until she was 10 or so, that is actively being bombed and drone strike by the US, you know?
Yeah. So that was the whole kind of like very interesting context. I feel like a lot of people kind of saw through that like left-wing anti-Semitism in the United States is not necessarily a problem, especially when very recently in the United States you had like the shooting at the synagogue where like 11 people were killed, and that was very much considered a right-wing attack. So yeah, the general impression I'm getting is that this whole thing didn't play, and I'm somewhat happy with that.
Yeah, it didn't play, but I think what is surprising is the fact that she isn't really backing down from her comments, which is good. I mean, it signals sort of a new, I mean, that's just not how politicians operate, you know?
Yeah.
The political instinct, at least what we're told or what's been described, is if you see some controversy or you say something that will alienate people, then you have to step back, apologize, triangulate. And she has convictions, you know?
Yeah.
It was inspiring when she said, there was some interview if people asked, she feared for her life because she's gotten tons of death threats. And she said no, because she knows she's doing the right thing and she's just living her life according to her values.
Yeah, that is nice. It's also worth pointing out that like the faces in Americans, like quote unquote progressivism, if you want to call it that, she seems to be the one with some of the best like foreign policy analysis. Like that's something that like a left criticism of Bernie Sanders has been, that he didn't have necessarily stellar foreign policy. Yeah. AOC is getting a lot of this criticism now, which I think segues into AOC's response to this whole thing, which was less than stellar.
So AOC, and it seems like they're friends. Like, I mean, AOC will post, I mean, there was like a photo of AOC that went kind of viral of her crying to like a speech Ilhan Omar was giving and about how proud she was of her. So like amongst this sort of new crop of Democrats, I do think they interact a lot. But basically, AOC's problem was that she admitted or agreed that Ilhan Omar should have apologized.
She conceded the point.
She conceded the point, exactly.
Yeah.
That AIPAC influences or like uses money to influence individual U.S. congresspeople, which is just plainly true.
She said something very, on the surface, seems very friendly and kind of like mediating and diplomatic, but like I think concedes the point. It's based on this whole Twitter conversation, but concedes the point that criticism of AIPAC in Israel is equivalent to anti-Semitism. And yeah, I think this is kind of leading to the broader discussion of anti-Semitism as this like stick you beat your enemies with.
Yeah. Well, I wanted to say a few things about AOC and Ilhan Omar and how that relates to what matters about this, because it's not just, to me at least, it's not just like this palace intrigue. I think what's significant about it is, first, the way AOC has responded is to sort of keep defending Ilhan Omar, point out inconsistencies. Like after the resolution against Ilhan Omar was shot down, it didn't take. They just had this vague like resolution against hate in general.
Yes, yeah, I saw that.
Which obviously they all voted. Most of them voted for. I think 26 Republicans didn't. And so AOC would say something.
I love hate.
Yeah, they love hate. I mean, yeah. But like, and so I think AOC's whole thing is to point out these inconsistencies, or point out like that there's this photo from the West Virginia GOP saying Ilhan Omar did 9/11. It's like, is Islamophobic, like sort of like taking that low hanging fruit. Yeah. But the fact that she still says Ilhan Omar like hurt people's feelings, and that's what matters, that people felt offended by her comments, no matter whether they're true or not, which is fundamentally not the purpose of a congressperson or someone in power. It's to identify actual sources of suffering and work against them. You know? And insofar as Ilhan Omar is pointing out suffering that the U.S. causes in terms of their relationship with Israel and Palestine, and just drone bombing the whole world. Where is that going?
Not the whole world. They're not drone bombing us.
I think what's important that this situation shows is a few things. First, what it shows about AOC is that, or what it shows in general, is that a politician shouldn't be, and maybe this feels obvious to say, but I do think it bears repeating, that a politician is not a politics. You know, following a politician and agreeing with them is not a political program or agenda. And it is for a lot of people, and it's a complicated reason why it is. I don't think it's all, I think, I don't want to be overly critical of it, because I do think it's not like everyone should understand, an
ideology,
Marxism and materialism, like, just out of thin air. I understand why people latch on to politicians, but I think events like this are necessary to show that, the value of AOC isn't in just her and having her beliefs. It's her as a tool to enact change and to bring about political change, and broadly speaking, to bring about a kind of class struggle in the future. And the thing about AOC is that some policies that she has, such as Medicare for all, such as abolishing ICE, which I don't know, hasn't been talked about so much lately, those can achieve that end, but they don't necessarily have to achieve that end. I mean, a Medicare for all approach, as we see in Europe, just having universal healthcare does not end capitalism. It would be good to have it, but it's mostly good to have it as a way of putting people on a direction for. I mean, I think shout out the Trillbillies podcast. If you're listening to this, you should subscribe to their podcast because they're cool. One of them tweeted like fundamentally AOC's policies, while they might be just really terrible to the right wing, it's not fundamentally contradictory to capitalism. No. Whereas Ilhan Omar's comments about the U.S. having an empire and having being a settler colonial state that allies with other and has like a client state of Israel as another settler colonial state operating in a similar way, that is fundamentally against the U.S. imperial capitalist project. And it's not that suddenly, you get rid of all of AOC's policies and now you like all of Ilhan Omar's policies. I mean, some people have pointed out now how in a recent interview, a few months ago, but Ilhan Omar was like, yeah, maybe I vote for Elizabeth Warren. I like Kamala Harris. Like, it doesn't mean that some socialists are like, yeah, she's canceled. She's not a Bernie supporter. It's not about that. It's about her and her comments and using them as a tool to actually disrupt capitalism and empire in the US. And AOC can do that to some extent, but it seems like she is setting herself up to work in the system more than people thought when she was first elected. Yeah. I mean, when she was elected, it was inspirational because people thought this was a challenge to the system. She still can be, but her in particular, and it also shows the new social democratic project that, I mean, people who call themselves democratic socialists, the limits to that project as a tool for actually challenging the U.S. power.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean that Ilhan Omar has all of the right points and all the right strategies. It's that she is identifying those tension points more directly and more clearly.
Yeah.
And so defending her I personally think it's brave and inspirational, but it's more so what she's doing as a tool or as an important moment.
I'd like to take a little from the like anarchist perspective of all this and borrow a little from them. Get used to the idea that no individual is going to have like a perfect set of politics or policies. That's not something that's going to happen, no matter how much you stand for them on Twitter. But this kind of leads us into the greater topic of anti-Semitism being used as this stick, largely in bad faith, to destroy an opposition. I think people have talked about to no end the situation in the UK, where Corbyn is constantly accused of being anti-Semitic, largely for having... I'm not even sure if Corbyn has had particularly anti-Israeli comments. He's just had more pro-Palestinian comments. If you want to look at it that lens, that's a fine line sometimes. But then... And there has been councillors in the UK who have said things that are very clearly anti-Semitic, but councillors in the UK are like never vetted and they are always batshit insane. Like UKIP councillors are just some of the most insane people. Tory councillors come out with some blood and soil nationalism every so often and want to talk about doing like trade deals with like countries that don't even exist anymore, like Siam. They range between like being awkwardly talking about Jordan Peterson young and then incredibly fossilized old and talking about like the opium crisis in China or something. But the next and probably more recent one I don't think is being talked about a lot because language barriers. France is like our fucking favorite boy Jupiter, Manu, has talked about Macron has discovered the anti-Semitism beating stick because
imagining he's just like in his head like, so what really happened is he just was like some like aide of his like gave him the news like, you know, this like weaponizing anti-Semitism to like beat back the left seems to be working, and then he like that's what happened in reality, but in his head he's like approaching like the sword and he pulls it out like he's he pulls it out from the stone like he has this new superpower. And he's like it's yeah.
He just imagines himself as Wonder Woman a lot of the time. Emmanuel Macron as Wonder Woman. I feel there's a bit there. I can't think of it right now. But Emmanuel Macron has discovered this. If anyone doesn't know, his popularity has been falling pretty damn low, mostly due to the Yellow Vest, the Gilets Jaunes protests, which have is a broad umbrella movement and it like depicts France as a whole. So there's some batshit insane people in that movement. It's understandable, but their general criticism of Emmanuel Macron is that he's being overly punitive to the working poor in France and giving a lot of tax breaks to the wealthy and corporations, or in a means to attract more wealthy and corporations into France. That's kind of his big deal. This is very true as a criticism of Emmanuel Macron. He will tell you this is what he's doing in so many words. But recently, a Yellow Vest group kind of very, very much attacked a French university professor by the name of Alain Finkielkraut, who is a professor in France who happens to be Jewish, and he was attacked. It was an anti-Semitic attack. I'm going to say that now. We're not here to hand wave this away. He was told to go back to Israel as a man who's never like lived in Israel, constantly lived in France his entire life. His personal politics are fairly dodgy, and that's possibly what attracted the attack in the first place. But like, yeah, the attack was not fucking on. But now Macron is like making anti-Semitism within France his like pet project, because he's now realized this is something that he can attack the Yellow Vests with. And anyone who doesn't know, anti-Semitism in France has been a very persistent problem. Like Rob was talking about Vichy France.
I'm just imagining that like Macron like had never heard of Vichy France, and he's like, this thing goes all the way to the top. This anti-Semitism. We have to do something about it.
He almost hasn't, because there was that huge scandal where he was like celebrating this World War One hero in France, who then went on to be like the leader of Vichy France.
He's like, this Dreyfus affair. Did you ever hear about this?
Yeah. Fucking hell. But I mean in more contemporary history, ever since like there was like a record number of attacks in 2015, which was only a year and a bit before he took over the presidency, and anti-Semitic attacks within France, like Jewish businesses being attacked and Jewish people being attacked and graves and properties owned by Jewish people being defaced, has been like a consistent like thing in France. Not like huge numbers, but you know, more than one of these happening per year is like a concern in itself. But it was like ranging within the couple of hundreds. 2015 was a record-breaking year. The numbers for 2017 aren't in yet, but if the first 3 quarters are anything to go by, it's not going to be a good year. But this is something that he was not talking about for his first couple of years of presidency until this anti-Semitic attack by the Yellow Vest happened, and he's hopped all over it like nothing on fucking earth.
Can we read the quote from France 24 that I pulled up?
Yes, please do.
Am I going to do it?
You should do it, but
can you do a French accent?
No, but we're going to give this like a little bit of a preface. This quote is very emblematic of like how Macron has turned the upswing of anti-Semitic attacks into like everything I do and say is good.
Yeah, we should point out Macron. What's his approval rating? Like 12%?
It's about 20-something%. Okay, he hasn't reached Hollande numbers yet, but he's on track to do so. Hollande holds the record for lowest approval rating for any sitting French president. I think
that's honestly impressive.
14% towards the end of his presidency. Yeah.
So the exact quote that he had, and this is just an excerpt, is, "Anti-Semitism is a repudiation of the Republic in the same way that attacking elected officials or institutions is a repudiation of the Republic." Now, I know Macron, you know, he's a genius brain, so maybe you don't understand what he's doing here, but it's very subtle. He doesn't say that attacking elected officials is literally anti-Semitism. He's just saying, in the same sentence, there are many attacks on the Republic. For example, the two I will say right next to each other are anti-Semitism and attacking elected officials or institutions. You cannot attack institutions. Save the institutions. There are anti-institution tropes being used. I've been listening to punk songs. They have tropes about institutions, that they're corrupt. You can't call institutions corrupt. That's a trope. That's an anti-institution trope.
That's against the Republic. And if one of these things seems to be happening quite a bit by my political opposition, that's just a coincidence, I guess. This quote was like made like a couple of days basically after the Yellow Vests attempted to storm the Bastille. Like, yeah, he knows what he's fucking doing. But yeah, France a little late to the party. The UK did it first. America just tried it there, but like using anti-Semitism as a stick to attack the left. Again, we'll just couch this by saying we're not whitewashing anti-Semitism on the left. It can happen.
My cop-out is I just don't understand the anti-Semitism in Europe.
Yeah.
Because like, I'll be on like Twitter, and then there's someone like, I'll be like deep in some replies, just wasting time. Yeah. And there'll be someone talking about like, like Zionist communism, and it's like the left in Europe wants to be like Zionist communism. I'm like, what the fuck is this guy talking about? And then I'll like click on it, and it's like 2 followers, like Lil B and John McDonnell MP. And I'm like, what is going on here? Like, I just don't. I don't know. I will.
We need a deep dive episode.
We need to deep dive into this. This is not something we can tackle now. Rest assured, the right, Emmanuel Macron, the Corbyn critics, and above all, Ilhan Omar's critics, they do not care about actual anti-Semitism.
No, probably not. Yeah, so I think that's going to do it for us here.
That's all we have.
That's all we have. On all seriousness, Shout out to Melty Brains for the use of the theme song New Dawn. It's a classic banger of a hit. They are like a weird jazzy experimental Irish band. Check them out on SoundCloud, Spotify, all that good shit. Melty Brains, get on that. Yeah, that's gonna do it for us.
Yeah.
Yeah, see ya.
Peace.